Welcome to my views on news. Two news stories. First one is about announcement by US State Department today about war crimes against humanity committed in Ethiopia, especially in Tigray. Antony Blinken, US Secretary of State, blamed all parties. What is going to be the impact of this announcement by US government? Because Ethiopia is hoping to get Agwa restoration. It wants financial aid from the US and US backed institutions. Secondly, viewers, a call is being made for African Union to mediate between the Oromo Liberation Army and Oromia regional government, Ethiopian federal government. A letter has been submitted to African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. Can African Union play a role in the resolution of the conflict in Oromia? Can we say that Pretoria deal was basically mediated by African Union, or was the US main player there? Details for you. Firstly, viewers, while Ethiopian government is trying hard to get financial assistance from the US and US-backed institutions, US is increasing pressure upon Ethiopian federal government. Antony Blinken, US Secretary of State, visited Ethiopia last week. Ethiopia was hoping to receive some financial direct aid, but Blinken did not announce any direct financial aid. Rather, he announced more than 300 million US dollars to be spent through US aid and US State Department in Ethiopia. And we know that for a poor human rights record due to human rights abuses committed during Tigray conflict, Ethiopia was suspended last year from AGOA, African Growth Opportunity Act. Ethiopian textile, leather exports had duty-free access to US markets under AGOA. Since then, Ethiopia has been trying to convince the US to restore Ethiopian status for AGOA. But Antony Blinken, in his visit, when he was in Ethiopia, stressed that transitional justice must be ensured. Those involved in human rights abuses should be held accountable. That is why I analyzed, in my analysis of the visit, I said that Blinken's visit was not a ray of hope for Ethiopian economy, which is in dire need of direct financial aid. Now, US State Department has published Human Rights 2022 report, and Antony Blinken shared key points of this report. We have a clip for you. And in his talk, Antony Blinken accused all parties that they committed crimes against humanity during Tigray conflict. All parties are Tigray People Liberation Front, the TPLF, Ethiopian National Defense Forces, ENDF, Eritrean Defense Forces, EDF, and Amhara forces. All are involved in different types of crimes. Amhara forces are being accused by Antony Blinken of ethnic cleansing. ENDF and EDF committed crimes against humanity, including rape, murder, etc. TPLF fighters were involved in crimes as well. Blinken in his talk said that the department analyzed all the developments in Ethiopia, and then it reached this conclusion that crimes against humanity were committed during 2-year-long war in Ethiopia. Now, the first impact of this report is going to be on Ethiopian efforts for restoration of AGOA. It means US is not going to restore Ethiopian status for AGOA. very clear. Secondly, US is not going to give any direct financial aid to Ethiopian government after this report. Why? Because US lawmakers will oppose direct financial aid and they'll definitely, they won't allow the US government to give direct aid to Ethiopian government. They would ask US government to put pressure upon Ethiopian government to hold people accountable for these crimes, which US now says were committed during Tigray conflict. Yes, US can indirectly help Ethiopia now through IMF, through World Bank, but no direct financial aid for Ethiopia is possible now. So not a good news for Ethiopian economy. Let's see how Ethiopian government, TPLF, EDF, Eritrean government, they respond to US State Department's report. Watch a clip of Antony Blinken when he spoke about the abuses committed in Tigray in Ethiopia.
The conflict in northern Ethiopia was devastating. Men, women, and children were killed. Women and girls were subject to horrific forms of sexual violence. Thousands were forcibly displaced from their homes. Entire communities were specifically targeted based on their ethnicity. Many of these actions were not random or a mere byproduct of war. They were calculated and deliberate. After the department's careful review of the law and the facts, I've determined that members of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, Eritrean Defense Forces, Tigray People's Liberation Front Forces, and Amhara forces committed war crimes during the conflict in northern Ethiopia. Members of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, the Eritrean Defense Forces, and Amhara forces also committed crimes against humanity, including murder, rape, and other forms of sexual violence and persecution. Members of the Amhara forces committed the crime against humanity of deportation or forcible transfer and committed ethnic cleansing through their treatment of Tigrayans in western Tigray.
Secondly, because Ethiopian members of parliament, MPs, have written a letter to African Union. The MPs are from the Oromia region of Ethiopia. They are members of House of People's Representatives. Reportedly, they went to African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, and there they submitted this letter to African Union officials. The letter is about need for African Union's intervention in Oromia. The MPs say that African Union should have intervened in Oromia years ago to save the lives of innocent people who are dying. What African Union did in Tigray should be welcomed. At the same time, African Union should do the same in Oromia as well, and African Union should mediate between Oromo Liberation Army and Oromia regional government, Ethiopian federal government, because the two sides, Oromia government, OLA, recently they have issued statements showing their interest in dialogue. Now, let's see how African Union responds to this letter written by Oromia region-based members of parliament. These members of parliament a few months ago wrote a letter to Prime Minister of Ethiopia, to Speaker of House of HOPR, and to Speaker of House of Federation, and they opposed the military operation against OLA. Back then, Ethiopian government was planning to launch a full-scale military operation against OLA. But these Oromia region-based members of parliament took the position that talks should be held. And we know that the Oromia government is making an offer of talks to OLA. OLA wants some third party to be mediator. OLA wants third party guarantors, third party mediators, some neutral states. That is why talks could not start so far. Now, can we say that it was mainly African Union which mediated the Pretoria deal? Had there been no US, could there have been the possibility of signing of Pretoria deal by TPLF? Well, I personally think US was the main player who played a key role in the days leading to Pretoria deal. Without US involvement, Pretoria deal was not possible. African Union was not impartial. It was not seen as impartial by TPLF. African Union alone was not in a position to make TPLF and Ethiopian government sit at the table. It was mainly US. And US is interested in mediating in Oromia as well, because if you remember a few days ago when Anthony Blinken visited Ethiopia, in his statement in US State Department statements, there was mention of Oromia as well, that conflict in Oromia should be resolved. I don't see any problem that US wouldn't be part of the solution regarding the conflict in Oromia. I think a joint effort is needed. African Union alone cannot bring peace in Oromia. US, some other players should join hands with African Union. They can jointly form mechanism and talks can be held in Addis Ababa, outside Ethiopia as well. Let's see how African Union responds to this letter written by Oromia region-based members of Parliament of House of Representatives.